Good morning. All right, so no one stole my joke so far, and so I am pleased to be able to do this again. My favorite part of giving any presentation is the part where you get to say good morning. The audience says good morning, and then you have to say, oh, we can do better than that. I say good morning again, and this time with enthusiasm we respond good morning. So let's try this again. Good morning. Good morning. Ha, you guys just fell into my trap. So in the afternoon, we're going to try this again. Right, and I'm going to hope that the energy level that we just established will be matched in the afternoon. Okay. So as many of you know, my brother works in this building. He looks like this, but he's a little bit taller than I am. So he did confirm that they will be serving donut ice cream sandwiches at lunch, and so so I'm hoping that this will help with the enthusiasm. Oh, sorry, that was a lie. They're not really serving, but I'm hoping that'll help with the enthusiasm level this afternoon. We have got Matt Parkinson in the back. We've got a couple members of the DLGF team back there, and so this feels like a very important time to announce that this may be my last auditors conference. Okay, all right. So, as the most enthusiastic person from the Fort Wayne area, my mother still lives in town, and I did not come in last night to see her. So when I have to see her this evening, and I have to explain why, one, I still don't have a grandchild, and two, I didn't come in early, it might be curtains for me, so. Nailed it. Okay, switching from the two jokes that I have to the apology tour. Lori is right. My presentation was not ready yesterday. I did finish it up. It will be posted. We will get it out the door. But this is something I have to do better at. So I know that during the last conference, did the same sort of apology tour. What I'm going to have to do is compare the apology that I made to Lori last fall to the one I'm doing this spring. She is fantastic to work with. She's a very important partner for both, for the Department of Local Government, Finance, and she's just awesome to be around. And she has been quite polite, letting me know that these deadlines and these due dates were coming up. I just couldn't quite carve out the time to pull it off. So this isn't Lori's fault. She did her best, but this is all she has to work with. And so in the fall, I will do better. Now, separate from the eye strain that not having the presentation ready in advance will be putting on the individuals in the back, it is also doesn't reflect very well on the department. That's something that I need to improve on. Further, I will be talking at some length about the importance of being on time with what we're working on as we are doing things earlier than we did them last year for the benefit of the group, and I have to do that with no sense of irony whatsoever. So personally, I'll need to do better at just being at practicing what the department is preaching during the upcoming year. Okay, so I've got two different presentations for you today. The one that I'll be doing this morning is more of a budget overview. We'll be talking about due dates and timelines. We'll be looking at things that we've looked at before, things you have heard before, but there's a very specific slant that we'll be looking at. There's a very specific slant by which we'll be looking at all of these various due dates and timelines, and Matt talked about that one a little bit earlier. I do promise that I will have you out of here long before lunch. I can burn through slides faster than Dan can, but hopefully it won't come to that. The presentation this afternoon is a little bit more in depth. It's going to be a little bit harder of a presentation to give, but it's extremely important information. Now, one last thing before we get started, I did want to recognize the 4 DLGF budget field reps that are here in the back. If I could get them to stand, please. And wave your hands to the nice people. There we go. Okay. This is an extremely dedicated and knowledgeable staff, and we are lucky to work. I am very lucky to have inherited such a group. This year, with the conclusion of the last budget cycle, between the 12 of them, they have more than 200 budget seasons under their belt. They are a wealth of knowledge. They are a fantastic resource, and I hope you will continue to reach out to them with the questions and the concerns and the comments. They are a terrific line of defense against me making some pretty terrible decisions, right? They really do try to make sure that everything that the department is doing does have your best interest in mind. And so I thank them. You will have noticed that over the last 3 or 4 months, the department has had a number of presentations that we've been giving, whether it was at the regional AIC meetings or the 10 separate IASBO presentations. We have 4 here from the northern part of the state at the Auditors Conference. The department is marshaling a tremendous amount of resources to make sure that the field reps are as visible as possible. We know that they are a fantastic resource, but we want to make sure that they are on the forefront of conversations and presentations like the ones that we're giving. It is also very important that they are hearing what we are telling you, and that you can see that it's important that they hear what we're telling you, and it's important that you see that that the information that we're providing, they've had an opportunity to weigh in on, and that they are experts that can answer these sort of questions for you. And so I checked my phone earlier, and I am 120 emails that need a reply. Very often, you'll find that your field reps can answer the same questions that you're routing up to me. So, on those rare instances where they have me out of the office, knowing that you can get answers or you can get the same sort of support that you're getting from the central office staff directly from the field reps. If necessary, they can always route things vertically, but they would absolutely recommend that that you use them as your starting point. Okay, I think that's enough tap dancing, and we've got everybody back inside. Let us get started. All right, so just a quick table of contents of things we're going to cover. It's the budget calendar. We're going to look at that again. By the time we get to the last slide of that section, you'll see why it is that we continue to bring up the budget calendar, including the encouragement of units to develop their own internal timelines. We're going to talk about the gateway trainings, Form 22s, additional appropriations, and then the last portion of the presentation, we're going to be looking at the July estimates that the department will be releasing, or some of the documents that the department will be releasing over the next 2 months. So this is a shortened version of the budget calendar, not as expensive as the one that we have posted online. The one we have posted online includes due dates for libraries and cities and towns for all unit types. What I tried to do for the ones that we'll be looking at is focus a little bit more on the more county-specific due dates. You'll see that one of the updates we made, we inherited a fantastic calendar from Courtney, from Dan Jones, but in an effort to try to improve something that was already working quite well, what we wanted to do was embed the Indiana codes that are associated with it. I should have started with a disclaimer that what we're looking at here are summaries. We're shortened versions of much longer and expansive code. And although we're trying to summarize it here so it's in these easily digestible pieces where we can sort of get an idea of what is going on by including the code citations in the calendar, if you are ever having trouble sleeping or if you ever want to see what the source of these particular summaries look like, each one of the chapters and sections, we wanted to include those as well. So starting with, not going all the way back to the beginning of the year, but starting with the information that we distributed last week, May 18th was an extremely important day for us, where we released memos associated with the annexation, where we released the annexation template and memo, the TIF neutralization memo and template, the TIF excess AV memo and template, and re-released the lit supplemental distribution schedule. So last week there was a lot of email flying, and although we tried to stagger those releases, it's important that you know that each one of those 4 have been distributed so far this year. The next due date for us is the end of May, where the budget agency will be releasing its first estimates for the calendar year 19 local income tax. The department will be using that as the source material for, we'll use those estimates as the source material for providing to the units the approximations of their 19 distributions. Okay. We will come back to that. Jumping forward to June 30th, we know that is the statutory last day for settlement to be concluded. And although that's not primarily a DLGF function, we know how important that is to both your offices as an extension of the settlement and the distribution money. Where the department has its most interest is relating to the Form 22 reporting through DCAF. But as will be the theme, we will be looking at this in more detail as well. When we get into July, we really get into the bulk of what the department will be distributing. If the upcoming gateway workshops can be considered the unofficial start of the budgeting process, as the department starts releasing reports like the ones that I am not on the right slide. As the department begins releasing information relating to the max levy estimates, as we release information relating to the CUME fund, the miscellaneous revenue estimates, that really does become the official start of the budgeting season, when we are starting to make available to you the information that you'll be using over this next 5.5 months to compile and complete your budgets. Jumping back, July 2nd, that's the one, where we're looking at the statutory due date for the county assessor to deliver the real estate books and to roll the personal property figures. This is the bulk, or this really does represent the backbone of the presentation that I'll be giving this afternoon, so I wanted to mention it here, but we're going to spend some time on that particular topic this afternoon. Okay. Jumping back forward into July, in earnest, statewide, we'll be starting the budget workshops the week of July 16th. So all the field reps will still be going out to the various counties, meeting with the local units. But we'll be, as will be the theme throughout the course of the year, we'll be doing that. We'll be attempting to do things like that earlier than we have in the past. July 31st is the last day that the department has for providing those max levy estimates. But although that's our statutory due date, we will definitely be looking at trying to make those totals available to you prior to that day. August 1, and again, this is going to be the backbone of the presentation this afternoon, but that is the statutory due date by which the auditors need to certify their AVs to our office. And this is a topic we're going to spend a lot of time discussing. Jumping ahead to September 3rd is the last day for a binding unit to take action. Now, we'll talk a little bit about gateway training, but the department is really based on the feedback that we've received, the department is making real efforts towards trying to make sure that binding units understand what their responsibilities are with respect to budgets. There were a number of uncomfortable conversations that the department ended up having with units that thought that the county auditor was responsible for creating, calculating, submitting, and ultimately approving their budget. We are doing our best to make sure that that message gets out so that if you are adopting a budget for a binding unit, that they understand what it is they need to provide you, how it is they need to provide that information, when they need to have that information to you by. So again, based on the feedbacks that you routed through your field reps, that's definitely something that we are trying to make sure that we can avoid those uncomfortable conversations too late for us to actually take action on them. All right. So I want to do these slightly out of order also. So jumping to the second one, where we're looking at October 19th as the last day for a unit to file an excess levy appeal, is a very important date for all units to have in mind. Again, you can submit them sooner, but that is a very bright line on the October 19th. If we look at the first, third, and fourth bullets, we really start getting into the cascading effect of how much time we start looking at a cascading effect of the decisions that you're making for when you'll be advertising for your public hearing, having the public hearing, and then having your adoption meeting. Unlike a presentation that you have to give at an auditor's conference, this can't be done overnight. Okay. That you effectively need to make sure that there's enough time as prescribed by statute between each one of these sessions. So when we post here that October 12th is the last day to post a notice for your taxpayers, that would give you the 10 days you need before you can have the hearing, and that would give you another 10 days. And so effectively, we're working backwards from the last day that you can adopt to make sure that you have enough space throughout the month of October to allow for enough time to meet the statutory requirements. I want to do these out of order. Also, looking at the center to November 1st and November 5th, those are still part of the cascading. I promise at the end of these, I will post all of these slides. I will send them to you, even with some of the corrections that I've noticed. You don't have to take pictures. Doing these slightly out of order also, November 1st and November 5th are still part of that cascade, both the last day for a unit to adopt, and then although it says November 5th, we are looking at making sure that any adoptions are entered into the gateway system within 48 hours. This year we have the benefit of a weekend, so that's why we have November 5th listed there. The first slide there is the October 31st, right? The last day for a county to submit an updated lit ordinance for us in order to see a change in the actual distribution amounts that they'll be receiving in January. And although Matt will be doing a presentation or a much more thorough presentation on all things that are lit related, it's a very important date for all units to keep in mind when it comes, if the county itself is considering any changes that they want to see go into effect on January 1st. Okay. All right, so the last bullet we have there is December 14th. And so what we're looking at there is the last day for units to submit an additional appropriation to our office. And although the December 14th date doesn't appear in statute, that allows the department to have the 15 days that does appear to review, approve, and return the additional appropriation. All right. So you guys have heard this before. You guys have seen this memo. Why is the department bringing it up again? And hopefully the change in color and the increase in font helps to sort of put that into context. As Matt talked about before, under Senate Enrolled Act 321 from 2016, the deadline for certifying budgets that the department has is switching from February 15th to December 31st. As we see on the calendar, many of the due dates that the units have for taking action have not moved back accordingly. We're ultimately just looking at the 45 days that the department used to spend reviewing that we're going to have to shift our efforts forward. Now, if I hadn't given up sleeping months ago, this would keep me up at night. I have, well, in many conversations with both Wes and Matt, we've had the conversations about what it's going to take for us to meet that due date. We will internally, we'll be looking at what type of technology that we can take advantage of, whether or not we can switch things that we are doing manually to a programmatic standpoint, if there's new software that we need to develop, if there's new software that we need to generate, how do we get ourselves in the position where we have the highest likelihood of meeting that new December 31st due date? But that's only phase one. Part of the reason why we keep stressing the calendar, part of the reason why I keep stressing the calendar, why we keep returning to it, is because we can't do this alone. One of the weaknesses of the calendar that we just went through is that we want to build it so that you know when the last day that you can take action is. The statute says this is the date that you can take action, and we can't change that. What I'm hoping is that where possible, you can take action earlier than you had in the past, or consider taking action earlier than you had in the past. By submitting earlier, quick show of hands, there are at least 3 counties that have completed their settlement, their spring settlement. Show of hands. 1, 2, 3. There it is. All right, so they still have, absolutely. So although they have until June 30th to complete that, they have all the information they need. They can start the process sooner. The information they have today is not going to change over the next 6 weeks. By working towards an earlier submission, they have freed up time and energy and any limited resources that the state has to take them through the process. What I'm hoping that you'll do is consider doing the same things from a budgetary standpoint. Consider doing the same things from a department standpoint. And so whether that is budgets like we're going to talk about now, or this afternoon when we really start digging into the CNAV submission process, anything that you can do that allows you to take action earlier gives us a puncher's chance, right? In poker, they would say that all you need is a chip in a chair, right? If you were a boxer, they would say that you've got a puncher's chance of winning. I am not sure what the equivalent for a budget director is. It just doesn't. Budget in the hopper. I don't know what that means, Tara. Do you? Okay, so while there will be certain places where you don't have an opportunity to take those actions, anybody who can will ultimately take the pressure off of, take the pressure off the end of it. If the department gets 2,500 budgets on the last possible day, we will still turn those around by December 31st. If we can get them sooner, we'll still meet the same due date, but it'll probably keep a few more gray hairs out of my goatee. Okay. All right. All right. So, with Commissioner Bennett's background as a local elected official, he is bringing into the office ideas that we perhaps hadn't considered before. And although being the clerk treasurer of a town is not the same as being the director of a library or the superintendent of a school corporation or the county auditor, the ideas may have some benefit in transitioning between the different unit types. To that end, the department still has the recommendation for all units to consider putting together their own individual unit calendar of the dates, due dates, timelines, but whether it's from a state perspective or whether it's from a local perspective, to make sure that all the deadlines are still being met, all the submissions are still being done, that things that are due on one day are logged in such a way that allows you to spend the 2 days, 2 weeks, 6 weeks to compile and submit that information. And so whether that is something like confirming on your individual calendar when your tax and billing vendor is coming out to help you work on settlement, or whether that is internally figuring out when you'll be submitting your DCAF information or submitting your Form 22 information via DCAF, whether that is adding directly to your internal calendar when your budget workshop is scheduled, when your State Board of Accounts reports are due. These with the number of deadlines that we'll be seeing, or trying to come up with a very specific way to organize them to make sure that all parties are met. Now, the second part of that one is not just from a state perspective, but also a recommendation to start to consider unit or county-specific occurrences that may be taking place. For example, so not just your office, but if you are planning on having an adoption meeting, will all the voting members be available at that adoption meeting? Again, looking at some of the uncomfortable conversations that the department had last year during the budgeting season, some of them came from some pretty frantic folks who are trying to figure out what their options were, because now it's time to adopt. They don't have time to start the process over, and 4 members are all on fall break at the same time. So it's not just making sure that you have a meeting scheduled, but that all the people who need to be there are actually going to be there. So the recommendation is to consider it. It's not something that you have to submit to us, but something that we're promoting pretty heavily, just to make sure that the budget process is going to go as smoothly as possible. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about still focusing on what we're doing for the next 3 months. Let's talk about the Gateway training schedule. So again, one of the very important services that the department provides are these Gateway trainings. If the reports that we're generating represent the official start of the budgeting season, these Gateway trainings are a tremendous resource for the unofficial start of the budgeting season. And so we are, that is teeny. So we've got 23 on the books so far, with a total of more than 1,081 seats available. As of Friday, we were at just about 30% capacity for those trainings. We want to make sure that, as budgeting is difficult for a number of reasons, and one of the reasons that should always be considered at the top is the idea that we do it so infrequently. You know, we did it last summer, and now we're starting the process over. Nobody quite gets enough, or nobody, including myself, gets enough repetitions for this to feel like it's second nature. If I can convince Matt that we should be doing budgets once a month, you know, by the end of the year we would have seen plenty of. Sorry, that's not true. We'd get more repetitions. We get used to the terminology. We get used to the flow. We get used to how Gateway Budgets acts and how we interact with it. By doing it once a year, it is easy to do it once and then next year feel like you're relearning it. would recommend anybody, whether this is year 1 or whether this is year 8, consider attending the workshop. Consider attending the workshop again this year. You can see, you will see when we send this out, or by monitoring the emails that our Gateway staff, like Billy, who is out front, so who is at the resource table today, we have expanded this to more counties, to more locations than we have in the past in order to try to make them as accessible as possible. Additionally, we got very close in Monroe County of adding a second date because of the overwhelming. We got close to adding a second date based on the overwhelming response. We moved from one room to a larger room, and we almost ran out of space in the larger room. So this isn't county specific. This is the same message that we're going to be delivering to all unit types, but it's difficult because we just don't see it very often. This is a great way to refresh what the forms do, what the submission dates are. Make sure it's a way to make sure you have the most up-to-date and accurate information about due dates, timelines, any changes that we have seen from last year. Okay. So speaking of which, we greatly changed the format of the Gateway presentation this year compared to last year. Last year, the presentation was given by a budget field rep, and then another presentation was given by our Gateway support staff. Each one of the training sessions was done in an actual computer lab, so that someone could follow along in real time, press all the same keys, press all the same buttons, navigate through it. What we've done this year is there's the same 2 groups are still going to be presenting, and budgeting is still relatively straightforward, and so the information is very similar, but we've switched it to 2 presentations instead of we've switched it to 2 presentations and then a dedicated Q&A session. So at the end, if you have a very specific question about one thing that you want to see, the budget field rep or the Gateway support staff can take you through that slide, or they can take you through that process, or they can speak to it at length without trying to move the entire class from step 1 to step 2 to step 200. What we're hoping is that this leads to a more interactive presentation, but it definitely gave us the ability to expand this to larger areas and to take advantage of some of the other locations that we previously hadn't presented on. Especially in the Southwest, there weren't a lot of opportunities for us to have. There weren't a lot of computer labs that we could use, but by switching to this format, we're able to have more trainings than just the one in Evansville. Okay. So it is important for these trainings that we make sure that of the seats are available. We really do try to prioritize local officials and members of their staff. But as the schedule has made it out, as we start to see a slowdown in the signups, we will be expanding that to FAs, to attorneys, to other members who may be, or to other individuals who may be interested in seeing the department's presentation on the budgeting process. If you haven't signed up or were thinking about signing up as you get closer to the date, would encourage you or members of your staff to sign up sooner rather than later. Once we open this to the public, the seats that may seem like they're available today may find themselves filling up rather quickly. So. Okay. So separately, the budget workshop. The field reps have been reaching out for the budget workshops, and if memory serves, we're still waiting on a couple responses. Now, this is undoubtedly the best resource that we provide during the course of the year. This presentation notwithstanding. So this is where the field reps are scheduling the meetings, and they are spending time with you one-on-one to talk about the same concepts that they're covering at the Gateway trainings. We'll be doing these beginning in mid-July, running them through the end of August. We're doing them earlier than we had in the past, just to make sure that we've got everybody squared away sooner rather than later, but that is still absolutely part of our process. I know that the turnout has historically been good, but considering the impacts of Senate Enrolled Act 321, if you didn't attend last year, this is the year to attend, just to make sure that you are absolutely up to date with all the things that you'll need to do to make sure that you're able. if you hadn't attended in the past, this is definitely the year to attend, just to make sure you're up to date with all the new terminology or any of the changes we've made to any of the forms or the process. As just a short reminder, wanted to sort of follow up with what Dan had talked about earlier. The budget field reps are a fantastic resource, but one thing they cannot do is provide financial advice. They can make sure you understand the deadlines. They can make sure you're aware of all the resources available to you, but they can't tell you to go left or right. But they can't tell you to do left or right. They want to, but if they do, then they have to answer to me. Okay. Okay, so let's transition again to another subject, and that is DCAF, Form 22 reporting through Gateway DCAF. Lori, how am I doing on time? Perfect. You promised to play me off if I start going long.
I'll start walking forward.
Oof, that is
That's scary enough, right?
absolute. Okay, so I'm going to have to. I am long on slides and short on time, so I'm going to have to do my best to speed this up a little bit. So, all right. So, I got ahead of myself. When I got to the last slide about December 31st and the efforts for us to do things sooner than we have in the past, that is the sort of the whole focus of this morning's presentation. As that relates to this particular slide, DCAF reporting Gateway DCAF has been the official submission method for Form 22 information to the department since June of 2016. The information that is reported to us, for DCAF reporting to the department, a full submission will include property tax, excise, FIT, and CVET. Those are the only four things that need to be reported to the state, and DCAF is the only way those need to be reported. Occasionally we'll still receive the paper forms of the monthly lit distributions or other distributions that are going to local units, though from a submission standpoint, I can confirm that the only thing that you need to submit to the department from a DCAF standpoint is property tax, excise, FIT, and CVET. Okay. All right. Now, one of the other issues that we run into is the information gets added to our system, but it never quite the information gets loaded into DCAF, but it never actually gets submitted. And so as we're coming up on that particular time of the year, for those fine folks that have already finished their settlement, making sure that the information doesn't just get loaded, but someone with the submitter role physically presses the button that lets the department know that these are the final figures. In the past, we generally had more time to reach out to follow up. As we will see during the course of this upcoming budget cycle, all of those, that extra time is going to get reprioritized towards budget-centric issues. If we can get this on our first try, that is the goal that we'll be aiming for. The other area that I wanted to hit was that information that you're submitting to us is extremely important for these budget workshops that we're doing, not just from a miscellaneous revenue standpoint, but we also use the information you're submitting to anticipate the amount of excise and anticipate the amount of property tax that will be submitted. So it's not just that you're reporting it to us for a hypothetical purpose or just so that we're able to see that you did it. We will be using that information that was submitted as part of the workshops that will be starting sooner rather than later. Now, this, I imagine by the virtue of this very short conversation, this will be very easy for us to do in the upcoming year. I just wanted to give you a little bit more context as to why we're requesting that information and what it is that we're doing with it. One more. Okay. There are resources available. We have put together a pretty comprehensive guide on DCAF reporting that are currently posted and available to you. So if you had any questions about what button to press or how to do the submission, we have got information already posted. Also, your budget field reps are a tremendous resource for taking you through the process. The final resource available is our Gateway team. They can also answer they can make sure that you have the security that you need, the passwords that you need to be able to log in and complete that submission. Okay. So if for all the counties that attended an AIC presentation recently, you know that additional appropriations are an area that the department is focusing on during the upcoming cycle. Okay. Additional appropriation, just anytime that you are requesting an increase on the certified budget or the certified appropriation that the department's, an increase to the certified appropriation that the department approved, you're going to go through the additional appropriation process. The issue that we're running into is one of volume. And so statewide, in 2017, we saw just under 2,000 submissions for a total of just under 5,000 funds. The note here that is still kind of teeny is that 35% of those submissions came in the months of October, November, and December. Although we absolutely understand that there'll be an increase in additional appropriations once your appropriations start running lower, additional appropriations are going to conflict with the timetable for reviewing, approving, and certifying budgets. And so if we are putting more effort towards talking about additional appropriation and the processes that we are going through, mostly it's to make sure that we are not trying to flip a coin to figure out, do we certify a budget or do we process an additional appropriation? Now, obviously, we have to do both. We just have 1 hour to do it and 2 things that need to be accomplished in that time period. Now, from a county perspective, if 1,900 were the total statewide submissions, 865 came from the county level, which makes sense. You guys have more money, you guys have more funds, so we understand the increase. But by continuing to talk about it with this group as, with all 92 of you in one room, or in some of the smaller, more regional conferences, is just to try to make sure that we have enough time to accomplish both of the things that we're trying to accomplish during the same time period. Okay. So, although additional appropriations are absolutely part of the process, there are 3 areas that I would like to talk about as potential areas where we can improve. The timely submissions, the statewide implementation of the new additional appropriation form, and then the elimination of 2 very specific common issues. Now, timely submissions is relatively straightforward, but let me see if I can really hammer that point home. Although we saw an increase in the number of additional appropriations during the last 3 months of the year, based on the dates that were on those additional appropriations, we can tell that those weren't recently approved. These weren't recently approved requests. Of the 865 that we received, 165 of those had more than 100 days between the publication date and the certification date, which means that often a county would go through the additional appropriation process in July and then wait, and then August, and then September, and then October, and then send them all in at once. And I am certain that it saved them on postage, but we are approving. What we're hoping to do is take advantage of the time we have now to approve the ones that you are submitting, as compared to trying to sort of catch up once a year. Your field reps will be reaching out to make sure that none of these are sort of getting stuck in limbo, but I want to absolutely stress the importance of, once an additional appropriation is ready, submit it to us. We'll review it, we'll approve it, we'll review it, we'll approve it, and we'll get it back to you. But the ones you are completing in July, we would like to review, approve, and return to you in July. So as soon as they're ready, please send them into our office. Okay. So the second one, so in November of last year, we rolled out a new version of the form. Significantly or very similar to the existing form, but there were a couple of options that allowed us to speed up our review of the information. And what we're seeing here is we added a section that allowed us to return additional appropriations to you electronically instead of mailing them back to you. And although we will still gladly mail them to you, this ultimately ends up saving us time of the amount of time it takes for the submission to make it to our office, the 15 days that we have to review it, and then the amount of time it takes for us to mail it back. We would occasionally receive questions of, is this still, did you receive it? Are you still processing it? Do you have any questions about it? And we got to say, well, it's in the mail. By being able to return it to you electronically, we're able to significantly cut down on those questions that we're receiving. Okay. At some point in the future, we will officially sort of turn off receiving those old forms and then require everyone to submit on the most recent form, which we could have done last November, but we're trying to have a sort of a grace period here. At some point, those will turn off. If you're not already using the most recent form, please, it's the version that would have been released with the additional appropriation memo this year. It drastically speeds up our process. Now, the last one is the big one. Okay, so you'll notice that the additional appropriation that you're receiving have more, the information you're receiving back from us contains more information than it used to in the past. We are actively returning the state form that you submitted to us, and there are two areas where occasionally you will see red marks on your submission, and those are the two that I wanted to talk about. Predominantly wanted to focus on line 5 and line 8. Line 5 being miscellaneous revenue, and line 8 being the circuit breaker. Okay. So although, let's go back. If you can picture the additional appropriation form, which did not translate well to any number of slides that I tried to put it on, it's the bottom line that we're ultimately using to determine whether or not you have the funds to justify the additional appropriation that you submitted. And although occasionally we'll have someone submit a form that shows $1 million at the bottom, and they'll ask for an additional appropriation of $2 million, although we see that occasionally, we know that that's the bottom line that we're trying to figure out. Both line 5 and line 8, if the submission comes to us and we can't validate those two figures, we will adjust them on your submission to figure out whether or not line 17 still justifies the approval. So if you were to increase your revenue amount or omit the circuit breaker totals, we will add those in, we will factor that back into line 7, and then we will ultimately make the determination of whether or not the figures that we have on hand still support that additional appropriation. The last thing we want to do is approve an additional appropriation based on information that will allow you to outspend your means. But let's take a look at that a little bit more specifically. So from a miscellaneous revenue standpoint, we are using the final totals reported to us as miscellaneous revenue on the fund report. If the amount that you're reporting to us is higher, we'll adjust it downwards. Now, if the follow-up question is, does that mean I can't recognize additional miscellaneous revenue? The answer is absolutely. You absolutely can. But your additional appropriation will need to include an updated Form 2 with the new miscellaneous revenue totals. And so whether those totals are on Excel spreadsheet, whether you go into Gateway, download your originally submitted Form 2 information, and then make updates as necessary to the actual revenue that you've collected. These are all options available to you. But if you submit just the form with a revenue figure that we can't verify, we will adjust it down to the last known figure that we had. Circuit breakers are a little bit more complicated. So same idea. Line 8 contains a circuit breaker total. The number that we're using now are the actual circuit breakers that we derived based on the information submitted to the state auditor's office on the abstract itself. We translate those figures and have incorporated them into our additional appropriation review. If you're still using the circuit breaker estimates that you went through the budgeting process, that's part of the reason why you will see that figure scratched out and replaced. The figure that we're replacing it with is the actual circuit breaker total associated with the fund that you're reporting on. Okay. I went through that very quickly, but the takeaway here is line 5 and line 8. As you're working on additional appropriations, know that those two lines in particular are often need to go through an adjustment process in our office to make sure that the additional appropriation you're requesting is consistent with the information that we have on hand. If you have more questions about where those totals are coming from, would encourage you to reach out to your budget field reps. If you are looking for, the easiest possible way to come up with an updated miscellaneous revenue figure, or how to make sure that you aren't running into the issue of the additional appropriation that you are sending us is not same as the one that we are editing and sending back to you, would encourage you to reach out to your budget field rep. Okay. All right. So two more topics to work our way through, and Lori has not started walking her way towards the front. So we. Okay. We got 7 minutes that she says is give or take. Okay, so let's do July estimates. So very similar to what we've done last year, we'll be posting a lot of information that will be used during the course of the budgeting process on our website, as both statewide reports and under your individual counties under the unit-specific information. Each one of these Each one of these reports will be accompanied by a memo explaining why we're distributing it. It'll contain the code citations, what our recommendations for how that information can be used. But want to continue to stress the importance of preparing in advance. We still have the prior year information up so that you can get a sense of a general idea of the forms, of the layout prior to officially being on the clock. Let us quickly take a look at a handful of these reports. Okay, so the local income tax one will be the first one that we're releasing. Now, last year, the first following year, or so when the 2018 lit estimates came out was August 1st. Statute changed, and so we're going to be able to release that report much sooner. The format for that report looks very similar to the ones that we'll actually be using. So it'll be important to know that the estimates that we're releasing are for next year. This doesn't change your distribution amounts that you're currently receiving based on the other templates that we've had posted. The state budget agency will release estimates twice over the next few months before finally certifying those figures to us on November 1st. On November 1st is when we will know and when you will know exactly how much you'll be receiving in calendar 19. The one caveat for the following year estimates is like I said, we'll be releasing this 3 times. So estimate in July, another estimate towards the end of August, and then we'll finally be certifying on November 1st. Last year, 25 counties changed their current lit configurations, which meant that for the rest of you, the estimates that we released at the beginning of the cycle didn't change by the time we got to the end. But for those folks who are potentially considering a lit change, the first round of estimates will be based on your current configuration. The next round of estimates will be based on your current configuration. The last round of estimates will be based on the most recent information available to us. So it means that if we were to split the room into pieces, there's half a group that saw their estimates early in the year, and those estimates never changed. And there's a different part of the group that saw estimates during one part of the process and ultimately saw a different certification at the end of it. If you are considering a lit change, know that the following certification or the following estimate of certification will contain those updates, but there's a chance that those 3 reports won't be the same. Circuit breakers. So this is also a massive report that the department puts together. So this will be the 3rd year that the department will be releasing circuit breaker estimates. Okay. Not to be confused with the actual circuit breaker reports that we released 2 months ago, but a version looking comparable to this one. So the department will be putting together your circuit breakers based on max levy type. Now, this is an easy way to tell the 2 groups apart. The actuals that we're releasing are based on actual funds. The estimates are sort of rolled up higher. We don't know what funds you'll be using during the upcoming year, but we do have a way of estimating the actual circuit breaker impact. So we summarize it and distribute it with a spreadsheet that will allow you to spread that circuit breaker across any number of funds that you'll ultimately be certifying. So the department will continue to release that. Estimate. I do think it's important to clarify that statutorily we're responsible for releasing that estimate, but units aren't required to use it. It is important that circuit breaker is considered during the budgeting process. Our estimates are one of the tools that can be used to consider the impact of the circuit breakers across your funds, but it is not required to be used. Okay. All right. The miscellaneous revenue figures. This one's probably has the most pages of all the reports that we'll be releasing in July. What the department releases is a unit level breakdown of each one of the miscellaneous revenue types listed on this slide. That includes the adjustment for both column A and column B. So the amount we expect to be receiving over the next 6 months, and then the amount that we expect you to receive over the next 12 months, broken down by unit, broken down by revenue code. The state auditor's office will be releasing a summarized version of that same information, where they will say at a county level or at a city of town level, you should expect to see a 105 or 102% increase. but they won't have your individual units or your individual revenue codes received. Now, the report that's created by the state auditor's office is used by DLGF to figure out the specific unit. So they say 105% increase. We know you had $100 last year. Our report will show you specifically at 105. Their report will give you a sense of what the changes will be. Our report will take it a little bit further and show you specifically how this would impact these specific revenue codes. The notes section, which, geez, that is small. The notes section will show how those calculations are being performed. Okay. Other reports, the cum levy and the estimated debt service report information. The cum levy is the cum levy will be a little bit different than it was last year. As what we'll be providing are the maximum rates that can be used for the various units that have cumulative funds. Because of the change in the date for establishing or reestablishing a cum fund, we know we don't have to estimate that one. We know the submissions that we have already collected from you, we can use to produce this report in the past. The report will feel the same, but we know that the information that we have will contain any and all updates or any and all new funds, that whereas versions in the past were, because of just the nature of the submission period, would have historically not been included. Okay. Lori, how much time do I have? Ooh. All right. This is the advantage of having 2 time periods. I'll come back to this one later this afternoon. Let's jump forward to the last topic that I wanted to cover. Now, this one is not a county-specific issue, so this is not something that you are directly impacted as you are looking at your budgets, but this is something to keep in mind as you are the county, and this will affect the budget order that we'll be creating, and this is undoubtedly generating a number of questions that you would, this is undoubtedly generating a number of questions that you've been receiving from school corporations. This is a Cliff Notes version. Earlier this year, we did 10 separate IASBO presentations that ranged 10 presentations with the Indiana Associations of Business Officials that ranged anywhere from 3.5 hours to 5.5 hours. There is a larger presentation posted on our website that can get into a lot more detail that we're going to give into than I'm going to get into today. But I did want to give you the Cliff Notes version just so you have an idea of what House Enrolled Act 1009 from 2017 or House Enrolled Act 1167 from 2018 just did to school corporations. There will be links inside the presentations that will take you directly to those bills. They're only 100 pages and 50 pages. You guys can have that knocked out in just a matter of minutes. Okay, so the major provision here is that for school corporations and school corporations alone, the 8 funds listed have been eliminated. They are being replaced by 2 funds. So school corporations will no longer have a transportation and a bus replacement fund. They will no longer have an art association, or in Allen County, they will no longer have a racial balance fund. They will now just have an operations fund. School corporations and school corporations alone will no longer have a fund that's known as a general fund. That's going to get replaced by an education fund. Now, the reason why I bring that up, or the most important reason why I bring that up, is that this is not designed to have a financial impact on the counties at all. When the department is looking at establishing the max levy for these schools, we are going to take the levies from the 7 funds and use it to create our operations fund, right? So if you get questions about how this will impact you from a circuit breaker standpoint, or if there's any misconception that school corporations are either losing or gaining ground financially, I want to go ahead and sort of close those down. All this is it's easy. We should think about this transition as more of an administrative one, right? Where they had multiple funds that they used to interact with, they now have a single fund that they'll still be using for very similar purposes. Okay, that is the mile-high version of it, but it will ultimately impact the budget order that we'll be certifying. So if if there's any, in case anybody tries to compare the information we posted from last year to the information posted this year, especially as it relates to school corporations, detailed information, it will look vastly different. But when we start looking at the impact from a rate perspective, we'll see that all we've done is just all the House Enrolled Act's done is reclassified existing information into a different format. Okay. There's a presentation on our website, many more slides, a lot more detail. It includes information relating to how we're calculating that max levy. It includes a couple of the other more subtle changes for school corporations. If you are getting questions from your school corporations about how this is going to impact, would encourage you to route those directly to Matt. Send those directly to us. It's important that you guys are aware that this change is coming, that the budgets that they are working on this year will be impacted by this one, but that ultimately from a budgetary standpoint, there's no financial impact to this one. It's purely aesthetic. Oh, she says I'm good. Okay. Thank you.